father sold the business, and we went north. And my brother was going to school in Central State University. He finished after he'd come out of the military. They drafted him, really. He was in third year university. And they drafted him for the Korean War. He went in and spent 2 years in the army. He never got above private because he fought the system. But anyway, when he finished, he went back to Central State and finished. Then he wanted to go to med school. So he couldn't go to school in Florida because they weren't accepting blacks. And my dad, he said, well, why don't we just move north then? My dad sold the business and headed north, leaving us back in West Palm Beach for him to decide where he was going to live. He went to Philadelphia first, and for some reason he didn't like Philadelphia. So he moved over to Chicago, and he met a friend that persuaded him to stay in Chicago. So he wrote and told us, okay, I'm buying a house here in Chicago. It's a 3-flat building. We'll be living on the 3rd floor. And I thought, 3rd floor, what's he talking about, 3rd floor? 3 flats. Because I'd never lived in anything but a house. And but anyway, my brother and I, we put stuff in the car, in the truck. We had a new Chevrolet truck that we had, and we put some of the family goods in the back of the car, in the back of the truck. And we took off driving to Chicago. And my mother fixed some bags of chicken, fried chicken, and boiled eggs, and we had potato chips, and we figured wherever we stopped, we could always get some cold drinks, because you couldn't stop and go into a restaurant anywhere on the way, not out in those segregated states. So we first stop was in Atlanta, and we pulled into a service station and pulled over in a parking spot in the service station. We slept there overnight. I slept on the back of the truck, and my brothers slept inside the truck. But we finally ended up in Chicago, and my brother was on the wait list for med school. But then he had written to schools in Europe. He had written to Germany and France, and he wrote to one in South America. And he was accepted in all of them, but he chose France. Couldn't speak French, but he chose France. And he went to France to go to med school. And they went along with him for 6 months or so until he picked up his French. And he said he started learning French when he started sleeping with him. but he finished. He went there Sorbonne in Paris, and he finished. And during the time that he was there, I was in Chicago in high school. And no, I didn't finish high school, and I was working for Internal Revenue at the time. And I would be sending money to him every 2 weeks. And my mother would send money to him every 2 weeks. And my dad would send money to him occasionally. And so he got along, and he went along, and he finished. And after that, he stayed in France, in Paris. And he had a lot of a good life there in Paris. Then he married his wife. His wife was, I introduced him to his wife. She was a beautiful woman in Chicago, and I saw her walking down the street past our house one day, and I stopped her, and I started talking to her, and I told her, look, I have a brother. He's coming on here on vacation. I want you two to meet, because I think he can win you. But in the meantime, maybe we'll go to a movie or something. We'll go together. So she thought I was conning her or something, But they'd go to the movie and take her home, and I said, okay, good night. And then my brother came, and they hit it off. They hit it off real well. So well until I think they must have made 3 or 4 trips between them to Paris from Chicago. But and while I was in in the university. I was working then for internal revenue, and at one year, 63, I think it was, he was coming out of school. So I said I was going to go over to the university where he was. And that was the first time I had ever left the country. I had no intention of ever leaving. I hadn't thought about ever leaving the U.S. It was never something that I ever thought about. But I went to Paris, and that changed my whole life. I saw for the first time how free you could be, and how free I was. And I met a Danish girl, and she persuaded me to go up to Denmark with her to see how it was. And I said, Denmark? Where is Denmark? And my brother said, oh, what's going on up there, man? You have fun. And I went up to Denmark, and it changed my whole life all over again. I'd never seen so many friendly people. I remember once I was walking the street, and I wanted to make a phone call to my girlfriend, and I couldn't use the phone. And I asked the man as he was passing by, I said, hey, how do you do this phone here? He tried, and he said, oh, well, it's busy. He said, but come with me, or you can make a call from my house. And I thought, where is this? Is this guy gay or something? But he took me to his house, and all the while I was thinking, wait a minute, this might be something funny here. But he took me there, and his wife came out. I said, oh, okay. So she came, and she started making, she had cakes and some cookies, tea. I said, what is this? And I told him I had to go and meet my girlfriend because we had to go to dinner. He said, well, why don't you bring over here for dinner? I said, what? He said, hey, here, let me call her. He called her and told her, hey, look, why don't you come over here? Franklin's over here at the house with me, and we're going to have dinner, so why don't we just have dinner together? So he handed me the phone, and she said, oh, it's all right, I'll be over. I thought, this is strange. I had never been in a white person's house, ever. And here I am, this man that I met on the street, taking me to his house to have dinner. And I thought, wow, this is something else. And but anyway, that was my introduction to real freedom, real expansion of life. That my brother told me, hey, you'll have fun. And so when I got this man at the place where he took me, it was over by the castle. And he happened to have an apartment there that his father had worked for the king. And after his father died, the apartment went to him, and he would have it as long as he lived, and his son would have it if he had any, but he didn't have any children, so it was going to go back to the kingdom. And this was an apartment right in half a block from the castle, from where the king was living. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is too much. But this was a class that a person that I had met, and that had brought me into his house. And I was amazed at this. And when I had got ready to leave, go back, my mother called me a couple of times and said, "You getting a call from from the Internal Revenue asking me when are you coming?" Because I had overstayed my time. I told them, "Tell them I'm sick. Tell them I'm sick. I can't make it." And she said they called here twice. You both called twice, asking me when are you coming back, and I had to lie and tell them you were sick. and I spent, I had no intention of staying as long as I stayed, but I ended up staying about 25 days off, and I was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. But I got on the plane, and I remember the stewardess came over to me and said, "Sir, do you want to eat? You want to serve?" I looked up at it and I was crying. I said, "No, I don't want anything." I was leaving Denmark, and I could not believe I was leaving. But anyway, I'll tell you another thing about Denmark. My daddy, before he ever went into business, he worked for a company called Rinkers Construction. And there was a Danish man, went back to Denmark to get some money before Hitler invaded Denmark. He got the money and he came back to the company. And my daddy said he saw him and he said, "Oh, Mr. Hanson, hi," and reached out to shake his hand. Mr. Hanson reached up, put a cigarette in his hand, and said, "Watch it, Perry, you get your hand burned." This was my daddy's introduction to a Danish man who was living in America, who had just come from Denmark. So when my dad had told me that story, I didn't think, I would be like welcome in Denmark. But the people in Denmark were so nice. And I wonder, how did this man come to America and change his way of living? But he moved into the South, he moved into segregation, he moved into bigotry and prejudice, and he just adopted all of the culture. And that was the way he was. But then I came back to the States and I thought, boy, I can't stay in the States any longer. I gotta get out here somewhere. And I started writing companies to see if they would have any, invited to do any kind of work for them in different countries. I'd gone to a department store to buy a present for my mother, and I saw everything was imported, dresses and things. So when I came back to Chicago, I wrote companies in New York. They're asking if I could be a salesman for them, sell women clothes, whatever, and be a salesman for them in Europe. And I didn't get any positive answers, so that was gone. I was on a plane and I had a guy sitting next to me. We were talking. We had a long conversation going from, I'm not sure where it was. I met him, but he said, "How would you like to work overseas?" And I told him, "Hey, that's something I've been trying to do all the time." He said, "Well, if I hear of anything, I'll give you a call." I said, "Oh, okay." Forgetting all about it. I was working with Internal Revenue. And one day, I got a call from this man. And to this day, I don't remember who he was. I got a call from him and he said, "Franklin, how would you like to get in foreign service?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, there's positions in AID. I said, "What's AID? What is that?" He said, "Well, you'd have to spend the first tour in Vietnam, but you'd be with with the State Department organization." I said, "Well, hey, that sounds good to me." He said, "Okay, I'll have someone call you." And someone called me and asked me to come to Washington. They sent me tickets and all of this. And I was on per diem. And I went to Washington and had an interview. And they said, okay. So I had gone through a 6 months training for a course with the Internal Revenue. And I was scheduled to go over to the office one day. And I had gotten this job with the aide. So when my new manager came and said, "Okay, this is your seat, desk. You'll be sitting here, and here I got some papers for your cases you can start on." I said, "Oh, let me tell you, I'll be leaving in 2 weeks." He looked at me and said, "What? We just sent you through 6 months of training. You're telling me now you're going to be leaving in 6 months? Or you'll be leaving in 2 weeks?" He said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, I'm giving you a 2-week notice." And I left, and boy, he was burned up. He was out of this world angry. But he said, "There's no need for me you to even come back to work. You can just have a holiday for the next 2 weeks." He said, "Because I can't start you on a case because you never would finish it." So I said, "Well, I'll come in for the 2 weeks." He said, "Okay, just come in, just do what you want to do."